The 21st century begins October 1, 1982. EPCOT Center, Walt Disney World.
The experimental prototype Community of Tomorrow launched on October 1st, 1982, welcoming in its first 10,000 guests on that day. By the end of its first year of operation, EPCOT Center would see almost 11 million visitors pass through its gates, a truly impressive number. Those first-year attendance numbers were actually higher than what Disney was expecting, and rightfully so when you consider that the park was far from completed. Despite its massive size, you could fit both Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom within its borders. EPCOT opened with just 5 rides: Spaceship Earth, Universe of Energy, World of Motion, Living with the Land, and El Rio del Tiempo, which was the only ride in the World Showcase. We wouldn't see their flagship ride Horizons open until the following year, and the same goes for Figment's Journey into Imagination. 2 additional Future World pavilions, the Living Seas and the Wonders of Life, wouldn't open until 1986 and 1989 respectively. There was no Norway or Morocco pavilions, and there was no EPCOT resort area featuring hotels like the Beach Club and Boardwalk. And still, that initial park saw almost as many visitors in its first year as it would in the year 2024. So what kept drawing people into a seemingly underdeveloped park? There are obviously a number of reasons you could point to, but I think at its core, it comes down to one basic element: the music. Not only had Disney pioneered a new type of theme park with EPCOT Center, but they also returned to their roots, using original music as a storytelling device. The closest we had seen to this sort of musical revolution was probably during the Disneyland boom of the 1960s, when attractions like the Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean, and It's a Small World debuted. But as Disney's media library expanded through the 60s and 70s, they stopped writing new music for their theme parks, instead relying on established music from their films and TV shows. So how is it that EPCOT managed to buck that trend? Well, for that, we can thank one man, longtime Imagineer and Disney legend, Marty Sklar. During the planning stages for EPCOT, Marty noticed that throughout the 1970s there was a complete lack of original songs written for the Disney theme parks. He couldn't believe it. When I realized this, I was incredulous. What were we thinking in a company where songs have told stories for decades? But all of that was about to change. So let's put on those neon-tinted glasses and take a nostalgic trip back to the 1980s. This is the music of EPCOT Center.
I believe we can build a community here that more people will talk about and come to look at than any other area in the world. I'm sure this experimental prototype Community of Tomorrow can influence the future of city living for generations to come. It's an exciting challenge, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for everyone who participates. Speaking for myself and the entire Disney organization, we're ready to go right now.
My family would first visit EPCOT in the fall of 1991. And okay, 14-year-old Jay wasn't exactly impressed. But we would continue to visit multiple times in the decades that followed, until at some point something just clicked, and I realized that EPCOT had become my favorite park. The mix of unique attractions and shows, hands-on demonstrations, and that retro futuristic feel really resonated with me. And at the heart of that experience was the music.
But I tell you, the music, I love the music too. That may be minute in the thing, but it's very effective.
Now, peak EPCOT for me would be that time right around the Millennium Celebration. You had Jeremy Irons narrating Spaceship Earth, new music in the entrance plaza and interventions area, and of course, each day was topped off with the laser and fireworks spectacular illuminations, which I still think holds the crown as EPCOT's best nighttime show. But today I want to discuss those first couple of years of EPCOT, when guests were still figuring out what this theme park was all about. We had originally been sold on Walt Disney's City of Tomorrow, a hub-and-spoke network where you would commute from your home on the outskirts to the cityscape in the center, all while traveling via monorails and people movers. And Disney probably could have pulled it off. They were at the forefront of urban development at the time, quite literally leading the pack.
The architectural editor of New York Magazine recommends that all of New York City's town planning work be turned over to the Walt Disney Mickey Mouse organization because they seem to be the only people in America who are able to get anything done.
And despite all that, you can probably start to see the cracks in this bold idea. First, and probably foremost, is that even though Walt Disney World contains an amazing amount of acreage, roughly twice the size of Manhattan, you still have a finite amount of space to work with. Disney had already established that about 1/3 of their 43 square miles of land would be permanently set aside as a wildlife conservation area. Now you're proposing that a huge chunk of your remaining land be used for an actual city. Housing, businesses, parks, which will not continue to create the same amount of revenue moving forward as, say, a massive tourist destination. But even if we look beyond the potential profitability of this project, I think the biggest challenge an experimental city would have faced is this. Keeping ahead of the future ain't easy. Just ask either of the US-based Tomorrowlands. And while I'm sure it wasn't easy moving on from Walt's last great idea, it's not altogether surprising that in the end, Disney scrapped those plans and pivoted to a more traditional theme park. I still have to give the Imagineers a ton of credit. Walt had already promised us the future with EPCOT, and it was now up to them to make those dreams a reality. This brings us back to Marty Sklar and that missing original music. Realizing the monumental mistake they had been making, Marty began assembling half a dozen talented songwriters and composers to play a key role in EPCOT's storytelling. He brought in Disney veterans like Richard and Robert Sherman, Randy Bright, and Buddy Baker, as well as newcomers Bob Moline and George Wilkins. But it was one fateful night that may very well have changed the course of EPCOT's musical future.
Buddy evidently was, after I had done that session, was driving home from work one night, hit the center divider of the Ventura Freeway and plowed into another car and was taken to the hospital. And Bill Miller came over to visit him in the hospital and said, "Buddy, is there anybody that knows what you know?" And Buddy said, "I don't think so." Because Buddy had been doing everything, you know, all the music for all the parks. And Bill Miller said, "We'll get someone." So Buddy remembered me from just working with him and he called me up and said, "Would you be interested?" And then I was, and that's how I started.
Thus entered George Wilkins, a composer who had only recently started working at Disney after his work on multiple Rankin Bass productions had caught Baker's eye. Wilkins would become not only Baker's protege, but EPCOT's music director from 1981 until 2009, an extraordinary run in which he helped define the EPCOT experience. When you walked through those gates, you were transported by the music in a way that made you feel like you were actually part of an adventure. It's incredible, but with just a few notes of music and a clever bit of landscaping, boom, you were in Japan. Only you weren't. You were actually in a swamp in Central Florida. This cannot be overstated. As a counterpoint, let's take a look at this moment from the Avengers campus. An impromptu battle has broken out between Black Widow, Black Panther, and that villain I don't remember from that one Marvel movie. As the scene, for lack of a better word, crescendos, we get this. Did that excite you? Did you get goosebumps? Maybe some of you did, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But for me personally, the answer is a resounding no. This isn't the fault of the actors, who I think do a pretty cool job of performing the fight. Yes, it's a little dry, They don't exactly have the Indiana Jones stunt spectacular stage to perform on, but even that isn't the real issue. The real issue is this. Now this shot makes you feel something, and we could probably point to this as the moment when the MCU truly took over. And now you're reusing that music for this. It just doesn't work. Why not bring in a composer to do a full suite of music for the Avengers campus, including hero music for these types of battle scenes? The same can be said for Galaxy's Edge, which inexplicably has no music. That one is still a head scratcher for me. I think this is what made EPCOT so special. Let's do another quick example. Let's say you're at the Magic Kingdom and you hear this music. Could you tell me exactly where you are? Most Disney fans will instantly tell you Space Mountain, or the cue for Space Mountain. The song that plays while you walk to what I assume is the center of the galaxy is called We've Come So Far, and it was written by George Wilkins. You got it, EPCOT's music director. Wilkins would go on to write and arrange music for pretty much the entire park. When the bosses weren't happy with what the Sherman brothers had worked up for Horizons...
We should probably stop for a second and say, the Sherman brothers actually wrote a song for Horizons.
Right.
And
Correct.
then something happened.
Yeah, and then I orchestrated it, and we recorded it with Mick and brought it into a meeting, and all the people from General Motors were there, and Marty, and Randy Bright all of a sudden says, you know, I don't like that song for this. That's very Disney-ish, but this EPCOT is tomorrow. It's the future. It's the, just George could write something over so I wrote the New Horizons song. And at that point, I was working with the Sherman brothers on the Kodak Pavilion. I had to go tell them that I had just aced them out of Horizons.
Now, if you purchase the official album of EPCOT Center, the only soundtrack ever, by the way, that was solely dedicated to EPCOT, you were bringing home 12 of those earliest songs from the park. Although the collection wasn't complete, the tracks were selected with careful consideration to capture the spirit of the park, squeezing as much EPCOT magic onto the limited time an LP record would provide. You had 4 songs from the Sherman brothers, 3 from the Imagination Pavilion, including their latest song to get stuck in your head for hours, One Little Spark, as well as a short-lived song from the Communicore Pavilion.
You see, my friend, the computer makes life easier. Saves me time and headaches too. He sorts things out, analyzes in a shake. My enormous problem to him's a piece of cake. He's got a great big memory like an elephant. Utilizes knowledge without end. That's why I'm a router for me computer. Everybody needs a friend.
As silly as it may seem today, back in the early 1980s, there was honest concern about the fears people had in a world that was increasingly relying on computers. Disney thought a song about how helpful a computer could be in your everyday life would help ease those worries. And with a bit of jolly holiday flair, that's what the Sherman brothers delivered. Of course, similar to Y2K, those fears proved mostly unfounded, and the astuter Computer Review, which was the show featuring the song, was discontinued in 1984. For the universe of energy, Disney would bring back a certain songwriting duo that you may recall from my Pete's Dragon video, Al Kasha and Joel Hirschhorn. It was a well-deserved victory lap for the guys who brought us Candle on the Water. For EPCOT's greatest ride of all time, Living with the Land, that's right, you heard me, Bob Moline would both write and perform the original theme song.
Just make believe you're a tiny little seed. A tiny little seed that's reaching up to meet your need. With the right amount of faith and the right amount of earth, you'll grow to see the sunshine on your day of birth. Let's listen to the land we all love. Nature's plan will shine above. Listen to the land, listen to the land.
A fun side note to Living with the Land, George Wilkins would write the instrumental theme that plays as you float through the barn and into the greenhouse, as well as the music for the ride's final scene. And both of these tracks can still be heard on that ride today, over 30 years later. EPCOT Center would continue to evolve over the decade that followed. The Living Seas Pavilion would transport us via Seabase Alpha to the bottom of the ocean, once again featuring music by Wilkins, as well as newcomer Russell Brower. The Wonders of Life Pavilion would take us on a very different set of adventures. The nausea-inducing Body Wars, with music by Leonard Roseman, would take you deep inside the human body via a motion simulator. I don't know if I've ever seen my dad so sick after a ride. The plucky animatronic-led theater show Cranium Command took you deep inside the mind of a teenage boy. And boy, did I relate to that one. But the cherry on top was a short film teaching kids about how they were conceived, starring an always restrained Martin Short.
Thank you, God!
And featuring some really great music by Bruce Broughton. What a time to be at Epcot. While Epcot remains my favorite of the Disney parks, I'm admittedly less excited about the IP takeover that has seen a truly original and unique idea turned into a more basic Disney experience. Those days of "this isn't Disney, it's the future" are now in the past. I certainly can't be the only one who's a little sad about that, so I'd love to hear about some of your favorite times at Epcot. When did you lay eyes on that giant silver golf ball for the first time? Let me know in the comments. So until next time, my name is Jay. Thanks for watching.